All right, welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Product. I am here with Sara Capra today, and she is going to share her journey into product. Welcome, Sara.
Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to do a short little introduction to for yourself?
Sure. As you mentioned, my name is Sara Capra. I'm a senior product manager. I kind of started off in the product realm really with a company I started um, several years ago, and then since have transitioned into another company and have been working on web and mobile apps since then.
Nice. Yeah. So, big question of the day: what is product management? What is it to you?
I think, you know, I would say the sort of conventional definition is planning and organizing, all the planning and organizing that goes into developing and releasing a product. But I think the piece that's sort of missing from that is the executing on the vision. So maybe planning and organizing around executing on a vision and then delivering that product. Um, there's so much more, but
There
I
is.
think in a nutshell that describes it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn quite often, and I always see these posts of PMs explaining way they do in product management. And there's always little nuances that I think that you could never possibly fit totally into a job description. And with it being, it's kind of an exploding career path right now. It seems like there's so many people looking to get into product management. It's kind of hard to find a clear definition. So I love hearing what everyone has to say about it. How did you get into product management?
So when I uh, kind of left my startup, um, I just did some kind of evaluation around what I really loved most about running it and realized that it was the people. I loved working with people all the time, internal and external stakeholders, developing people as a manager. And then I loved anything that I got to do with informing how the product was built. Anytime I was, able to get in and do some testing, that all of that just really excited me. And so I said, okay, well, if those are the pieces that are really exciting to me, then I think I need to figure out what my next career move is and really incorporate those two things. In addition to that, when I started my company, I knew how to code a little bit, but certainly not to the extent that I needed to build out any kind of robust application. And that could be a challenge. I mean, going up in front of investors and not, you know, being able to say that you're as technical as you would like to be, given that you're running a tech company, it can be a challenge and something that I really wanted to work on when I had the time. And so the next step was I applied for an apprenticeship program through Tectonic. So they run something called the Tectonic Academy. They are still doing it today. I highly recommend doing that. It was incredibly valuable experience. So I got a grant from the Department of Labor to go through that program and learn to code, learn the sort of fundamentals of coding, object oriented programming, a variety of things, and then got hands on experience, developing apps and a number of other things. So from there, I transitioned into being a product manager at Tectonic, and then I had that technical aptitude that really allowed me to, I think, excel there fairly quickly. So that's that's kind of how I got into it. So it's been a wild ride. I know it's really different for everyone, and it was the same for me. I really struggled in the beginning to figure out, like, how does one get into product management? And
Yeah.
it's true, all the articles you read out there that say there's no one route um, are true, and I hope that that is encouraging for people to hear and know, because that means you don't have to follow one specific recipe in order to succeed as a product manager. I think there are certainly core skills that are necessary, but in terms of how you get into it, there are so many ways. So just keep chugging if you're trying to get into it or if you're just trying to grow in that space.
Well, I love that you say that it's encouraging that there's no one linear path. I've actually never heard it put like that, as it means that almost anybody can get in if you have have the core skills. It took me 3 years to get into a PM role, and I think hearing that it's encouraging that people from all different types of background could come into this role and be successful is really important for people that are aspiring to be PMs. You did mention coding, and actually, let me ask you this: how much of a technical background, or how much of the coding background helped you, or what advice around maybe coding and the technical background would you share with people aspiring to get into a PM role?
My suggestion around gaining technical aptitude, which I know is can be a really broad spectrum, but is to gain as much of it as possible
Yeah.
because it can only help. Now, I will say my disclaimer here is that that is my personal opinion and what I've observed from my own experience. But I've seen some content out there and heard some hiring managers say, sometimes I like to look for the less technical product managers because it's just sort of a different way of thinking and different sort of view,
Yeah.
and so some hiring managers may like that, but I can tell you from personal experience that it's been immensely helpful to have at least a little bit of a technical background, because I can sit down with developers and say, hey, can you just show me the code? And it's not that I'm doing code reviews
Yeah.
for them, but I can see what's going on and I can understand and I can ask informed questions um, about some of how how they decided to execute it or how we might implement something. And so I don't feel totally in the dark, so that
Yeah.
if something comes up 3 months from now, once we've released this feature and it's causing all these issues, um, either I was able to catch that in the beginning with the engineers, or we're at least informed about what's going on collectively. And I'm not saying, oh, I didn't know it was implemented that way.
Yeah.
So it's empowering, I think, is probably the key word there.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I've learned that it also helps build trust with the development team. Just coming from being new into the role, I'm 4 months into a PM role, and being able to speak to the code and the programming, and more so even just being curious around what they're doing and asking informed questions, I think really helps accelerate the progress of your team. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. I think you're spot on. And just to sort of tack on to that, I think what you just described there is also it's helpful because engineers want to be listened to like everybody else. And so if you can be curious and ask those informed questions and have an exchange, have that informed exchange with shared knowledge, that's really powerful. And it tells the engineers and anyone else, okay, I feel heard. And I think that's really important in a workplace and anywhere.
Absolutely. And for anyone listening to this, during the interview process, if you have a company or an organization that you're looking to work at, what I did early on is I checked out the engineers and developers LinkedIn profiles, and I kind of saw what programming language that they used, and then I went and kind of learned that before the interview process. So I don't know if that helped or hurt, but I don't think it could hurt you to do some research around the language that your team is using or going to
Yeah,
use.
great idea.
Yeah. What advice would you have for a new or aspiring PM?
I would say the first is to find a strong mentor and vet your managers as much as they vet you when you're looking for a position as a product manager. Um, I can't tell you how many times and how important it's been for me looking back to have a sounding board, someone I can collaborate with or just go to and say, hey, this is new to me. This is something maybe I haven't seen as a particular process with how something is done. What do you think about this? Or here's how I'm thinking about executing this or presenting this. What are your thoughts on that? And the other piece is not just someone that you can go to and kind of um, talk through ideas and troubleshoot, but also someone, particularly a manager, who is supportive, who I've had a couple of managers in the past who've said very explicitly, I just want you to know I have your back. And that doesn't mean that they always agree with you or anything like that, but it does mean that they're typically advocates for you individually and the product team as a whole. And there'll be times when if you go into a smaller company, you might be the sole product manager on the team other than maybe the director or something like that. And that advocacy is really important. So you've got to be able to both advocate for yourself and then make sure you've got a manager who's willing to do the same. And so I think them having a really knowledgeable manager in product is helpful as well. Be as detail oriented, as diligent as you possibly can. There are so many intricacies, as you know, to product, and that's not just speaking to the number of responsibilities that are often incorporated in a product role, but it also is about all the minutia when you're writing user stories. If you are writing test cases, are you making sure that you're accounting for what's happening on the front end and the back end? And it's just such a broad scope. And so to make sure that you really understand what your set of responsibilities are, how you're collaborating with, maybe QA and the development team, customer success, et cetera, and what you're just specifically responsible for and what they are is really, really important. Be a really good active listener. And that's true with your colleagues internally. I think oftentimes we're all so moving so quickly and we're anxious to share our ideas, or we need to really get the work done for this next sprint. And details can fall through the cracks. And so making sure that you're really listening to what people are saying and deciphering what they mean or what they want rather than just what they say, and asking those questions is really important. And that's true for, gathering feedback from customers as well. I think a lot of people will be able to empathize with this, but when you're talking to customers, if you say, well, do you want this feature? That's very different from saying, tell me how you do things currently. And showing or like observing them using a new feature for the first time and not leading them in one direction, and just really trying to get a sense from them what they need and what they would use rather than what they're saying they would
Absolutely.
want to use or what they need.
Absolutely. And I think, from my experience, especially as a new PM, it's really easy to get in there and want to show the world that I'm ready for this position and I know what I'm doing and I have all the answers, right? And so it's really easy to be the expert on your product. And I love that you say just watching them and not leading them to the answer, really find out how the customers use the tool or the feature and really building around that. Great feedback. Let me ask, do you have any favorite books or any books that you would recommend for a PM or up and coming PM?
Oh gosh, there's so many. There's some good Scrum books out there. I feel like I should just send you the list. I mean, I am very prone to reading books that are more in the leadership realm,
Yeah.
like Good to Great and Think and Grow Rich and some of those. But yeah, I'd love to send you some of the product ones. But I actually really have found that a lot of the leadership books and sort of personal growth books are really helpful and also communication. Crucial Conversations is one of my all-time favorite books, and I would recommend it to anyone. It has a little bit of a focus on personal relationships, which, hey, couldn't hurt. But you're going to get into situations in any workplace, in any profession, where you got to have a difficult conversation. And to be able to communicate effectively, facilitate in a way, and because maybe it's not even something you're involved in, but to be able to facilitate a conversation and get to a productive resolution or consensus is absolutely key. And just being a strong communicator and being able to align people in that way is so powerful as a PM, aside from some of the technical aspects. But I can tell you the communication piece is something that's been really core for me, in building relationships, being able to cultivate good relationships with the dev team,
Yeah.
etc.
I love that you talked about the personal growth and the Think and Grow Rich and the mindset type books. I mean, it's so easy to focus on like growing the skills or learning Java or learning how to program or whatever, that you forget that, a lot of your success in the role, at least from my experience so far, comes down to attitude and the way that you approach things from a mindset. And then obviously communication, like you said. I'm going to go order Crucial Conversations as soon as we get off this call because I'm excited to read that one.
I do want to mention one more thing. Just, I think it's really important, especially if you are either you are not in product yet, but you're looking to get into it, or you're early on in your career. And I haven't found that this is talked about a ton. And I've got a great article that I'd love to share with you, Brennan, that maybe you could put out for folks, in Harvard Business Review. But it's, make sure that when you are applying to a position, you're looking as much at the core responsibilities of the role as you are the type of company that it is. So what that org structure looks like. Are you on a team or are you solo? Are you working directly with the CEO? Or do they have a QA team? Is it one person? How many designers do they have? All of those things impact your day-to-day work as a product manager, how much responsibility you have, you know how quickly you're able to get things done. And in the article that I just mentioned, there's a really great breakdown of, you know when you're applying for something and evaluating a company, some good things, to think about, and will help kind of lead you to some good questions to ask about what the dynamic is with engineering. Does engineering drive product, or is
Yeah.
product driving? And so those are some things that for me didn't surface until a little bit later on. And I wish that someone would have sent me that article
Yeah.
earlier on in my career. So happy to share it.
No, that's awesome. I can't wait to get that article. I'll definitely plug it in the show notes, because that's so important. I think, especially, coming out fresh out of the interview process, you really think about, well, what's like my traditional like 30, 60, 90-day plan. You don't think about the org structure. You don't think about what the dev team looks like or what the relationships looks like. So that's a really good call out. Do you have any advice for maybe researching that? How do you get that information?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the job sites have some of that anyway. Like
Yeah.
if you go on Glassdoor, I believe they have like general company size, or I'm prone to going to like Crunchbase and some of those to
Okay.
see. And
Yeah.
it's unclear how frequently those numbers are updated, but those are good places to start. And then when you start interviewing, I would be very direct and ask, how big's the company at this point? Or
Yeah.
am I going to be on a team, and how many teams are there? And are there growth opportunities?
Yeah.
All that good stuff. But yeah, I think from a company structural standpoint, if you can you can even look at some of their other job listings. That's helpful, because if you see that they're hiring like a product marketing manager or something like that, you can tell they're building out that team. So looking at their team page on the website, their company website, is helpful. Looking at positions that are open, and then looking at some of those job sites or various company profile websites are helpful.
Really good call. Really good call. Anything that I forgot to ask, or any other knowledge you want to share?
Well, I want to say thank you for hosting this. I think putting content out there for product managers and aspiring product managers is really important. I know I'm always looking for additional resources to be able to network with other PMs and learn from them and share my learnings. And so just appreciate what you're doing. And I want to wish all the PMs out there good luck. And I'm also happy if anyone wants to reach out to me directly or has questions to
Nice.
follow up with you.
What's the best way to reach you?
LinkedIn is probably the best.
Awesome. I'll make sure I tag your profile in the show notes. So thank you so much for joining me this evening, Sarah. I really appreciate all the knowledge you shared.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. All right, let me stop recording.